Welcome back to Vietnamese Vixens. Today's story comes from a man who thought he'd found paradise at an age when most people have stopped looking. His name is Henrik. He's 72 years old, and he left everything he knew in the Netherlands to start over in Vietnam. What he discovered wasn't just a new country. It was a brutal education about loneliness, pride, and the lies we tell ourselves when we're desperate to feel alive again. This is his honest truth after 2 years. If you've ever felt invisible, if you've ever made a decision out of loneliness that you knew deep down was wrong, or if you've watched someone you care about chase something that was clearly going to hurt them, drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. Share your story if you feel comfortable. And if any of this resonates, hit that like button and subscribe, because these stories matter, and your voice matters too. Now, here's Henrik's letter. I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I wasn't some foolish old man looking for a young bride. I wasn't one of those pathetic expats you see in the bars, belly hanging over their belt, bragging about their 25-year-old girlfriend. That wasn't me. I had dignity. I had a plan. I'd done my research. I thought I was different. I was wrong. But let me start at the beginning, because the beginning is important. The beginning is Rotterdam in winter, which if you've never experienced it, is a special kind of gray that seeps into your bones and stays there. 50 years I lived in that city. 50 years of rain and wind coming off the North Sea, of cycling to work with my head down, of the same routes, same faces, same everything. I worked as a civil engineer, decent job, decent pension, married young to Marieke, had 2 kids, bought a house in a quiet neighborhood where everyone kept their hedges trimmed and their opinions to themselves. The divorce happened 15 years ago. I won't bore you with the details because they're not interesting. No affair, no drama, just 2 people who'd run out of things to say to each other. The kids were grown by then. Pieter became a lawyer in Amsterdam, too busy for regular calls. Sophie moved to Berlin with her husband, sends me photos of my grandchildren on WhatsApp, maybe once a month. They're good kids. They have their own lives. I don't blame them. After Marieke left, I stayed in that house for another 7 years. That's when the loneliness really started to settle in. Like mold in the corners you don't notice until it's everywhere. I'd wake up, make coffee, read the news, maybe meet some old colleagues for lunch once a week. They'd talk about their grandchildren, their weekend plans with their wives, their upcoming trips to Spain or France. I'd nod and smile and contribute nothing because I had nothing to contribute. Evenings were the worst. The silence in that house was so thick you could choke on it. I started watching YouTube to fill the quiet. Started with documentaries. Then somehow the algorithm led me to expat videos. Americans retiring in Thailand, Brits in the Philippines, Australians in Bali. And then I found the Vietnam videos. Something about them grabbed me differently. The energy of Saigon, the street food vendors, the way everything seemed to pulse with life. The comments were full of men my age saying the same thing. Warmth, affordability, respect for elders, a chance to matter again. That last part, one think, is what hooked me. A chance to matter again. I spent months researching visas, cost of living, healthcare, neighborhoods, language apps. I made spreadsheets. I joined Facebook groups for expats in Vietnam, read every post, asked careful questions. My pension was enough to live comfortably there, maybe even well if I was smart about it. The more I researched, the more it felt like an answer to a question I'd been asking myself for years. What now? I told Pieter first, over the phone. There was a long silence. Then he said, "Dad, you're 70 years old. You don't speak Vietnamese. You've never even been to Asia. This is insane." Sophie was worse. She cried, said I was running away, asked, what if I got sick? What if I needed help? What if this was early dementia talking? That hurt more than I want to admit. But I'd already made up my mind. I sold the house, sold most of my furniture, kept 1 suitcase of clothes and a box of photos I couldn't part with. My kids thought I'd lost my mind. Maybe I had. The flight to Ho Chi Minh City was 14 hours with a layover in Dubai. I barely slept. My heart was racing the entire time, this mix of terror and excitement I hadn't felt since I was young. When we descended through the clouds and I saw the city lights sprawled out below, dense and chaotic and nothing like the orderly grid of Rotterdam, I thought, this is it. This is the reset button. The humidity hit me the second I stepped off the plane. It was November, supposedly the cool season, but it felt like walking into a wet blanket. The airport was modern, efficient, nothing too shocking. It was outside, waiting for a taxi, where Vietnam really announced itself. The noise, motorbikes everywhere, honking, shouting, the smell of exhaust mixed with something sweet I couldn't identify. The taxi driver spoke no English, but I showed him the address of my service department in District 1, and he nodded, grinned, and drove like he was racing in Formula 1. That first night, I didn't sleep. Jet lag, sure, but also the sounds. My apartment was on the 6th floor, overlooking a busy street, and the noise never stopped. Motorbikes, street vendors, music from a karaoke bar, people talking and laughing at 3 in the morning like it was the middle of the day. In Rotterdam, if someone made noise after 10 p.m., the neighbors would complain. Here, life just kept going. I stood on my little balcony, looking down at the chaos, feeling completely overwhelmed and completely invisible at the same time. The first week was survival mode, learning to cross the street without getting killed. You just walk slowly and steadily and let the motorbikes flow around you like water. Finding a cafe that served decent coffee. Discovering the local market, where old women would smile at me and try to overcharge me for vegetables, until I learned to walk away and they'd laugh and call me back with a better price. I ate pho for breakfast because that's what everyone did. I walked for hours every day, down Win Hue Street, along the Saigon River, through Ben Thanh Market, where the vendors would grab my arm and pull me toward their stalls. I felt lost, but in a good way. A clean way. Like I'd erased the previous version of myself and could be anyone here. I started meeting other expats at a bar called The Spotted Cow. This dingy little place near Blevien Street where backpackers and long-term foreigners mixed. Most of the men were younger than me, 40s and 50s, teaching English or running online businesses. But there were a few closer to my age. Gary from Australia, divorced, living on his pension in a studio apartment, and dating a Vietnamese woman half his age. Tom from California, same story. Klaus from Germany, same story. I listened to them talk about their girlfriends, how sweet they were, how they took care of them, how different Vietnamese women were from Western women, how they appreciated a man with maturity and stability. I won't lie, it planted something in my head. Not in a creepy way, or at least I didn't think so at the time. Just the idea that maybe companionship was possible, that maybe I didn't have to be alone. Then I met Lynn. It was at a cafe in District 3, one of those corner places with plastic stools and old men playing Chinese chess on the sidewalk. I'd gotten into the habit of going there in the mornings because they had strong coffee and the owner never bothered me. I was sitting there one day, attempting to read a Vietnamese newspaper with my translation app, feeling ridiculous, when a woman at the next table laughed. Not at me exactly, but at the situation. "You like Vietnamese news?" she asked in English. Her accent was thick, but her smile was warm. I looked up. She was maybe late 40s, dressed simply in jeans and a blouse, hair pulled back, not trying to impress anyone, just a regular woman having coffee. "I'm trying to learn," I said, feeling suddenly self-conscious. She moved to my table without asking, pointed at the newspaper. "This word, you read wrong. This is about weather, not politics." We talked for 20 minutes. Her name was Lynn. She worked at a textile factory doing quality control, lived with her mother in Binh Thanh district. Her English was broken, but better than my Vietnamese, which was basically non-existent. She asked where I was from, how long I'd been in Vietnam, if I liked it. Normal questions. But the way she asked them felt genuinely curious, not transactional. When she left, she said, "Maybe I see you here again." I came back the next morning, and the next. She was there 3 times that week. We'd talk for a bit, she'd correct my terrible pronunciation, we'd laugh at my mistakes. It felt easy, natural. Like making a friend, which I hadn't done in years. By the 3rd week, we started meeting intentionally. She took me to places tourists don't go at Park, where old people did Tai Chi at dawn, a street food stall that served the best banh mi I'd ever tasted, a temple where she explained the incense and the prayers. She never asked for anything. She just seemed to enjoy showing me her city. I started to feel something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Not just attraction, though there was that too, but importance. Like I mattered to someone's day. When I spoke, she listened. When I made a joke, she laughed. When I told her about Rotterdam, about my work, about my kids, she asked questions and remembered the answers. One evening, we were walking along the river after dinner. The sun was setting, everything golden and hazy, and she reached over and took my arm. Not romantic, just casual, the way people do here. But it sent electricity through me. I was 72 years old, and I felt like a teenager. "You are kind man, Henrik," she said quietly. "Not like other foreigners. You try to understand Vietnam." I wanted to believe her so badly. That night, Lying in bed with the fan turning overhead and the street noise filtering through the window, I let myself imagine what it might be like. A real relationship. Someone to share this new life with. Maybe this is what I'd been missing all along. Maybe this move wasn't just about escaping loneliness. Maybe it was about finding connection. I fell asleep smiling for the first time in months. I had no idea what I was walking into. Things moved fast after that night by the river. Maybe too fast, but I didn't want to see it that way. Lynn started texting me every morning. Good morning messages with flower emojis, asking if I'd slept well, telling me to have a good day. Small things, but when you've been alone as long as I had, small things feel enormous. We saw each other almost daily. She'd meet me after her shift at the factory, still in her work clothes, and we'd walk through the parks or sit at street corners drinking iced coffee. She taught me Vietnamese phrases, giggling when I butchered the tones. I taught her Dutch words she'd never use but pretended to find fascinating. We'd have dinner at cheap local places where she'd order for both of us, making sure I tried everything, watching my face for reactions. It felt real. That's what I keep coming back to. It felt real. About 6 weeks after we met, Lynn mentioned her mother was having trouble with her blood pressure medication. Just mentioned it in passing, not asking for anything, but I could see the worry on her face. The medication was expensive, she said, and her factory salary didn't stretch far. I offered to help before she could finish the sentence. It was only 2 million dong, maybe 80 euros. Nothing to me. Everything to her, apparently, based on the way she teared up and hugged me right there on the street. You are so good, Henrik. So good. My mother will be so happy to meet you. Meeting her family happened the following Sunday. Lynn picked me up on her motorbike. Me, a 72-year-old Dutch man, clinging to a Vietnamese woman weaving through Saigon traffic. My kids would have had a heart attack if they'd seen it. Her house was in a narrow alley in Binh Thon, one of those typical Vietnamese homes stacked 3 stories tall and barely wider than a hallway. Her mother, a tiny woman who looked about 100 years old, greeted me with both hands pressed together in a bow. She didn't speak any English, but her face was kind. There were others there, too. Lynn's sister, Hua, with 2 young kids running around. A nephew, maybe 17, quiet and polite. An aunt whose name I didn't catch. They'd prepared a feast: spring rolls, grilled pork, rice, fish sauce, tropical fruit I didn't recognize. Everyone kept filling my plate, my glass, smiling and nodding even though we couldn't really communicate. Lynn translated bits and pieces, but mostly I just smiled back and felt welcomed in a way I hadn't felt since before my divorce. After lunch, the nephew approached me shyly. Lynn translated. He was studying computer science, but the tuition for next semester was difficult. Not asking me for money, Lynn emphasized, just sharing their struggles. I nodded sympathetically. Later, as Lynn drove me home, I asked how much the tuition was. She hesitated, said it wasn't my problem, that her family would figure it out. I insisted. She finally told me 6 million dong, about 250 euros. I transferred it that night. The gratitude was overwhelming. Messages from Lynn, her sister, even the nephew sending me a formal thank you note in broken English. I felt like a hero. Like I'd made a real difference in people's lives. Looking back now, I can see exactly what was happening. But at the time, I was too busy feeling important to notice the pattern starting. I decided to upgrade my living situation. The serviced apartment in District 1 was fine for a tourist, but I wasn't a tourist anymore. I was building a life. I found a nice 2-bedroom place in District 7 near Phu Mai Hung, one of the more modern areas with parks and shopping centers. Clean, quiet, safer. I asked Lynn what she thought of the neighborhood. She loved it, she said. Very beautiful, very peaceful. I didn't ask her to move in, not directly, but I got furniture for 2 sets of towels, extra closet space. I think we both knew where it was heading. I also started attending expat meetups more regularly, joined a group that met for coffee every Tuesday morning. Bunch of retired guys, mostly American and Australian, all with similar stories. Living cheap, dating local women, enjoying the freedom Vietnam offered. I felt like I'd found my tribe, but there was an undercurrent to the conversations that bothered me. The way they talked about their girlfriends, sometimes transactionally, cynically, comparing how much they spent, joking about what they got in return. Gary, the Australian I'd met at the Spotted Cow, loved to brag about how his girlfriend only cost him $300 a month, everything included. I told myself I was different. Lynn wasn't like that. What we had was genuine. These other guys were just bitter and jaded. Tom, the American, pulled me aside one morning. Listen, man, no judgment, but just be smart about it. Keep your finances separate. Don't let her family become your responsibility. I've seen this movie 100 times. I thanked him politely and ignored every word. 3 months in, Lynn officially moved into my apartment. It happened gradually, a toothbrush left behind, some clothes in the closet. Then one day all her things were there, and it felt natural. Her mother had given her blessing, she said. In Vietnamese culture, living together was serious, almost like marriage. I liked that. I liked the commitment it implied. For a few weeks, it was everything I'd imagined. Coming home to someone. Cooking together. Though she did most of it because I was useless in the kitchen. Watching Vietnamese TV shows I didn't understand while she explained the plot. Waking up next to another human being. The loneliness that had defined my life in Rotterdam felt like a distant memory. But small cracks started appearing. Lynn's phone was always face down. Always. If it buzzed during dinner, she'd glance at it, silence it, smile at me, and say it was just work or her sister. She started going out more, visiting her mother, she said, or helping her sister with the kids, or meeting old friends from the factory, sometimes overnight. I tried not to be possessive about it. She had a life before me. Family obligations were important in Vietnam. I'd learned that much. The money requests became more frequent too. Her sister's husband had lost his job and they couldn't make rent. Her mother needed dental work. The nephew's computer broke and he needed it for school. The aunt had a medical emergency. Each time, Lynn would approach it carefully, apologetically, saying she understood if I couldn't help, that it wasn't my responsibility. But the way she looked at me when she asked, vulnerable, hopeful, like I was her only option, made it impossible to say no. I started keeping track in a notebook, not because I wanted the money back, but because I was curious. In 6 months, I'd given or loaned about 25,000 euros, beyond our normal living expenses. My pension was good, but it wasn't infinite. I'd planned to live in Vietnam for 20 years on my savings and pension combined. At this rate, I'd be broke in 5. I tried to talk to Lynn about it one night, gently, carefully, not accusing, just expressing concern about our future financial stability. She got quiet. Then her eyes welled up. You think I use you for money? Like prostitute? No. God, no, that's not what I meant. My family has real problem, Henrik. Real need. I think you understand. I think you're different from other foreign men. But maybe I am wrong. She slept on the couch that night. I felt like a monster. The next morning I apologized, said I was just stressed, that of course I wanted to help her family. She forgave me, kissed my cheek, and everything went back to normal. Except it didn't. Not really. She became more distant. Still affectionate in public, still calling me sweetheart and holding my hand when we walked. But at home, she was often on her phone, distracted, irritated by small things I did, the way I chewed, my snoring, how I left the bathroom, things that had never bothered her before. The expat guys noticed the change in me too. I'd lost weight, looked tired. Klaus asked me directly one morning, "Everything okay with your girl?" "Fine," I said, "just adjusting to living together." He nodded, unconvinced. "You know where I am if you need to talk." I should have talked. I should have listened to every warning sign my brain was screaming at me. But I was trapped by my own pride and my own desperate need to believe I'd made the right choice, that I hadn't sold my house and moved halfway across the world for nothing, that I wasn't just another lonely old fool. The breaking point came on a Thursday night. Lynn said she was going to stay with her mother overnight because she wasn't feeling well. I said, of course, take care of her. Do you need anything? She kissed my forehead and left around 7 p.m. I couldn't sleep. Something felt off. Around midnight, I did something I'm not proud of. I opened her laptop. She'd left it on the dining table. Hadn't logged out of Facebook Messenger. I told myself I was just checking, just easing my paranoid mind, that I'd find nothing and feel stupid and never do it again. I found everything. Messages in Vietnamese, but I could see the photos. Lynn with a man, younger, fit, at a beach resort I recognized from tourist brochures. The dates on the photos were from 2 weeks ago, when she'd told me she was visiting her sick aunt in the countryside. More messages, more photos, him calling her MU, which even I knew meant my love. Her sending heart emojis, the same ones she sent me. My hands were shaking, my chest felt tight. I used Google Translate on the messages, even though I already knew what they'd say. He was asking when she'd leave the old foreigner. She was saying soon, just a little longer. He's giving money for her family, for them to start their future together. I sat there for an hour, staring at that screen, feeling every bit of my 72 years. When Lynn came home the next morning, I was sitting at the dining table with her laptop still open. She saw it immediately. Her face didn't show surprise, just annoyance. "You go through my private things? Who is he?" "My cousin." "You don't understand Vietnamese culture. We are close with family, not like cold European." "Don't. Please don't." She went quiet. We stared at each other across the table. I waited for her to cry, to apologize, to give me something I could use to rationalize staying in this delusion, but she just looked tired. "You think I love you, Henrik? You are nice man, but you are old man. You are lonely man who pay to feel young again. This is business. You know this." The worst part was how calmly she said it, like she was explaining something obvious that I'd been too stupid to understand. "Get out." She nodded, went to the bedroom, packed her things into 2 suitcases I'd bought her. Took about 20 minutes. She didn't argue, didn't beg. At the door, she turned back. "Your money helped my family. That part is true. One, I'm grateful for this, but you should go home, Henrik. Vietnam is not for you." Then she was gone. I sat in that apartment for 3 days, barely moving. The ceiling fan turned overhead, the same motorbikes honked outside, the same street vendors called out their products. Everything exactly the same, except I just had my dignity surgically removed, and I had no idea what to do next. The first week after Lynn left, I didn't tell anyone, not the expat group, not my kids, nobody. I stayed in that apartment like a wounded animal hiding in its den. I'd wake up at odd hours, the time zones in my head completely scrambled, and just lie there staring at the empty side of the bed. The silence was different from the silence in Rotterdam. That silence had been lonely, but familiar. This silence was humiliating. I kept replaying moments in my head, examining them like evidence at a crime scene. The way she'd always angled her phone away from me. The convenient family emergencies that always required exact amounts of money. How she'd cry at precisely the right moments to make me feel like a villain for questioning anything. And me, so desperate to believe I was special, that I'd found something real, that my life wasn't just winding down into irrelevance. The worst part wasn't even the money. Though when I finally did the math properly, I realized I'd spent about 42,000 euros in 8 months. The worst part was understanding that I'd known, deep down, in that part of your brain that sees truth, even when you're lying to yourself. I'd known the whole time. And I'd chosen the comfortable lie, because the alternative, admitting I was just another pathetic old expat buying companionship, was too crushing to face. On day 8, I forced myself to leave the apartment. I looked terrible. I'd lost maybe 5 kilos, hadn't shaved, my clothes hung off me. I went to a cafe in District 1, not the one where I'd met Lynn, somewhere anonymous, and ordered coffee I didn't drink. Just sat there watching Vietnamese life happen around me. Young couples on dates, families with children, old men playing chess, all of them belonging to something, all of them part of the fabric. And me, a thread that didn't match, that had never matched. My daughter Sophie called that afternoon. I almost didn't answer, but she'd worry if I didn't. "Dad, you sound awful. Are you sick?" "Just a cold. The weather here, you know." "You look thin. Are you eating?" I glanced at the video call, saw myself in the small box. She was right. I looked like a corpse. "I'm fine, sweetheart. How are the kids?" We talked for maybe 10 minutes. She told me about Emma's school play, about their plans for Christmas, asked if I was coming back to visit. I lied and said maybe next year, that I was really settling in here, making friends, enjoying the culture. Every word tasted like ash. When we hung up, I sat there holding the phone, wondering what the hell I was doing with my life. That night, I went to the Spotted Cow. Gary was there, Tom, Klaus, a few others I recognized. They saw me walk in, and I could tell from their faces they knew something had happened. This wasn't a unique story in their world. Gary bought me a beer. "You look like shit, mate. She's gone." He nodded slowly. "The girlfriend?" "Yeah?" Tom leaned in. "How much? Does it matter?" "Only for the betting pool. I had closed down for 3 months." Gary said 6. "You made it 8, so nobody wins." They were joking, trying to lighten the mood, but it made me want to vomit. This was entertainment to them. A predictable cycle they'd all been through or witnessed countless times. Old man meets young woman, old man opens wallet, young woman disappears, old man drinks himself into acceptance, repeat. "I told you to keep it separate," Tom said, not unkindly. "They all have sick mothers and struggling nephews. It's the playbook." She wasn't. I started, then stopped. What was the point? She was exactly that. I was exactly the fool they'd all seen coming from a mile away. Klaus put a hand on my shoulder, German directness, but with surprising gentleness. First one always hits hardest. You think it's different, you think you're different. But this is Vietnam, my friend. For them, we are ATMs with heartbeats. The sooner you accept it, the better. I got drunk that night. Really drunk, first time in maybe 20 years. They poured me into a taxi around midnight, Klaus making sure the driver had my address. I woke up fully clothed on my bathroom floor at dawn, head pounding, mouth tasting like something died in it, and thought clearly for the first time in months, I can't do this anymore. But do what? Go back to Rotterdam? Back to that empty house I'd already sold. Back to gray skies and loneliness. Back to being the divorced old man nobody had time for? I'd burn that bridge. My kids would take me in, out of obligation. And I'd spend the rest of my days being pitied, being the cautionary tale they'd tell their friends over wine. Remember when Dad had his midlife crisis at 70 and moved to Vietnam? Lost everything to some woman? Came crawling back? I couldn't face that either. So I stayed in limbo. Days blurred together. I moved to a cheaper apartment in District 10, nothing fancy, just one bedroom and a balcony overlooking a wet market. Cut my expenses to maybe €1,000 a month. My pension could sustain that indefinitely, even with my depleted savings. I stopped going to the Spotted Cow, stopped going to the expat meetups. I didn't want to be around people who saw me as a statistic. I started walking. Hours every day, no destination, just moving through the city. I walked through neighborhoods where tourists never went, where the streets were barely wide enough for motorbikes, where laundry hung between buildings and old women cooked on sidewalks. I walked along the canals in the early mornings when the city was just waking up. I walked until my feet hurt and my mind went quiet. One morning, I ended up in a park near Tan Binh district. There was a group of old Vietnamese men doing Tai Chi, slow and synchronized, looking peaceful in a way I envied. I sat on a bench and watched them. When they finished, one of them approached me. His name was Mr. Hai, spoke decent English, had been a translator during the war. "You watch us every morning," he said. It wasn't a question. I didn't realize I'd been here before. 3 times this week. You look sad. Foreigners in Vietnam, sometimes they look lost. You look sad. I laughed, bitter. Is it that obvious? Very obvious. You want to try? He gestured to the group. Tai Chi? I don't know how. Nobody knows how until they learn. Come tomorrow. 6 a.m. We teach you. I showed up the next morning, feeling ridiculous, this tall Dutch man among a group of elderly Vietnamese. They were patient with me, correcting my posture, showing me the movements. I was terrible at it, my Western body too stiff, too self-conscious. But there was something meditative about trying, about focusing on breath and movement instead of the relentless loop of shame in my head. I kept going back. Mr. Hai and I started having tea after the sessions. He asked where I was from, what I did, why I came to Vietnam. I gave him the sanitized version at first, but he had this way of listening that made you want to tell the truth. So eventually, I did, all of it. Lin, the money, the humiliation, the question of what the hell I was supposed to do now. He nodded throughout, no judgment on his face. When I finished, he poured more tea. "You know what your problem is?" he said. "You came to Vietnam looking for something to fill a hole. But holes cannot be filled from outside, only from inside." That's very philosophical, but it doesn't help me much. No? Let me ask you, what do you do here? Besides, think about yourself. The question stung because the answer was nothing. I consumed Vietnam. I walked through it, ate in it, slept in it, but I contributed nothing. I was a ghost passing through. "There is a community center near here," Mr. Hai said. "They teach English to poor children, children whose parents cannot afford private classes. They always need volunteers, native speakers especially. You could teach." "I'm not a teacher." "You speak English, yes? You can read and write? Then you are qualified enough." I started volunteering 2 days a week. The center was in a rundown building with chipped paint and ceiling fans that barely worked. The kids ranged from maybe 8 to 15, crammed into a room with mismatched chairs, sharing textbooks that were falling apart. They looked at me with wide eyes the first day, this strange, tall, old foreigner. But within minutes, they were calling me Teacher Henrik and showing me their homework. Teaching them was humbling. They were so eager, so hungry to learn, asking questions about pronunciation and grammar and what life was like in the Netherlands. I wasn't particularly good at it, had no training, but I showed up and I tried, and they seemed to appreciate it. There was a girl named Min, maybe 12. who stayed after class one day. "Teacher, you are sad sometimes," she said in careful English. "I see in your eyes." "I'm okay, Min, just thinking. My mother says foreigners come to Vietnam to run away from something. But running away does not work. You have to run toward something instead." 12 years old and wiser than me, I started running toward things instead of away. I enrolled in actual Vietnamese language classes, not the half-hearted app learning I'd done before. I volunteered more, 4 days a week, then 5. I made friends with some of the other volunteers, a retired Vietnamese teacher named Co Lan, who'd worked in the school system for 40 years, a young Canadian woman named Emma, teaching English before graduate school, a local guy named Tuan, who ran a small charity on the side. We'd have lunch together after volunteering, talking about the kids, about education in Vietnam, about life. Real conversations, not the transactional surface-level stuff from the expat bars. Nobody asked me for money. Nobody wanted anything from me except my time and my presence. I reconnected with Klaus from the expat group, but on different terms. He'd been through his own version of my story years ago, lost his savings to a woman in Hanoi, almost went back to Germany broke and broken, but he'd stayed, rebuilt differently. He worked part-time doing online consulting, lived simply, had Vietnamese friends who were actually friends. We'd meet for coffee once a week, talk honestly about the loneliness, the cultural displacement, the weird grief of living between worlds. "You know what I learned?" he told me one morning. "Vietnam doesn't owe us anything. These women don't owe us anything. We come here with our first world money and our first world loneliness and expect to be saved. But salvation is not for sale." 6 months after Lynn left, I saw her, pure accident, at a shopping mall in District 7. She was with the guy from the photos, holding hands, laughing at something on his phone. She looked happy, genuinely happy in a way she'd never looked with me. I could have confronted her, made a scene, demanded explanations or apologies. But looking at her, I realized I didn't need either. She'd done what she needed to survive. I'd done what I needed to feel alive. We'd used each other, just in different currencies. The only person I was angry at anymore was myself, and that anger had mostly turned into something quieter. Acceptance, maybe, or just exhaustion. I walked past without saying anything. I don't think she even saw me. 2 years in Vietnam now. 2 years of lessons learned the expensive way. I live in a modest apartment, teach English to kids who need it, practice Tai Chi with old men in the park, speak conversational Vietnamese with an accent that makes everyone laugh. My savings are depleted, but not destroyed. My pension covers my simple life. My kids video call more regularly now that I stopped pretending everything was perfect. Sophie asked me last month if I regretted it. Moving here, the whole thing with Lynn, the money lost. I thought about it honestly. I regret the delusion. I regret thinking I could buy my way out of loneliness, but I don't regret coming. Vietnam didn't betray me. I betrayed myself. Are you happy, Dad? Happy. Strange word. I'm not lonely anymore, which isn't the same thing, but it's something. I matter to the kids I teach. I matter to the friends I've made. Not because of my wallet or my passport, but because I show up. Because I'm trying to give instead of just take. I'm okay, I told her. I'm learning to be okay. And that's the truth. The honest truth after 2 years in Vietnam. I came here looking for paradise and found a mirror instead. It showed me everything I was running from: the loneliness, the irrelevance, the desperate need to matter to someone, anyone. It showed me that you can't escape yourself, no matter how far you fly or how much money you spend. But it also showed me that it's not too late to rebuild. Not the fantasy version, where an old man finds love and purpose handed to him on a tropical platter. The real version, where purpose is something you create through small daily choices. Where connection comes from giving, not taking. Where belonging isn't purchased, but earned through time and presence and humility. I'm 72 years old. I live in a country that will never fully be mine, speaking a language I'll never fully master, surrounded by a culture I'll never fully understand. And somehow, finally, I'm starting to feel at home. Not because Vietnam accepted me, but because I finally accepted myself. That's the lesson. That's what 2 years taught me. And if some other lonely old man is watching this, thinking about his own escape, his own reset button, I won't tell you not to come. Vietnam is beautiful. The people are kind. The life is rich and complex and worth experiencing. Just know what you're walking into. Know that paradise is a marketing brochure, not a place. Know that the hole inside you travels with you, and the only person who can fill it is you. And know that if you do come, If you do fall, if you do lose everything you thought mattered, there's a path forward. It's humbler than you imagined. It's slower than you wanted. But it's real. And real, I've learned, is worth more than any fantasy ever was.